So yeah, let's get right into that because it's there's so much. It is the proverbial fire hose, and then on top of it, this reconciliation bill, which we've all known we were going to be fighting, like cuts to Medicaid, cuts to SNAP, and those. If that was all there was, it's brutal. But then there's all this other shit, if you'll excuse my language, that they're
No, I mean that's like the
sneaking in.
nicest way to talk about it.
It's unbelievable. They want to give AI a blank check for 10 years. They want to defund Planned Parenthood, which as far as I can tell, it actually adds it costs money. It doesn't save money. It actually costs $300 million. They're coming after Pell Grants. They're coming after all they want to sell off public lands. There's just all this other stuff that they've snuck in there. It's crazy. So how are you doing in all this? How are you handling all this?
Well, look, um, what I think is most important is for us to recognize that we have a chance to stop it,
Yeah,
and that we have a chance in the near term to stop it, because we were in a not the same but a similar place before, just around 8 years ago, when
right.
Trump was in the White House. The Republicans ran the House and the Senate, and they said they were going to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. They
Yep.
said they had the votes, they thought they had it all tied up, but they think that they can run the government like one of Trump's companies or one
Mm,
of Musk's companies, but we're actually still a democracy and they aren't invincible to public pressure. And so people spoke out all across the country saying, don't kick millions of people off of our health care. And uh, the Republicans started getting scared, and we didn't back down, and we saved the Affordable Care Act with all the Democrats staying aligned against the bill, and
yep.
then John McCain casting that one brave vote in the Senate, and then
Yep.
millions of people stayed on their health care.
Yep.
We're in a similar situation. Republicans, if we get four of them to vote with their constituents instead of voting like an Elon Musk Trump employee, then we save Medicaid as we know it. We
Yeah.
save the food stamp program as we know it. We stop Planned Parenthood from being defunded. That's actually still possible. So it's really important for everybody at home to know that you should call your member of Congress, especially the Republican members, and ask them why they want to kick millions and millions of people. 8 million people in this bill, 13 million people by the end of the year off of their health care.
Yeah.
Because almost every voter, including the vast majority of Trump voters, oppose doing things like kicking people off their health care just to give billionaires a tax break.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. It's wildly unpopular. It's unpopular with something like what 80% of Americans across parties do not like any of this. They want billionaires to be paying more taxes. And yet here we are. And this is the thing that is so amazing to me is that so much of what Republicans are doing in general is just so wildly unpopular.
But part of what they do is they kind of capture this media eco system, this echo chamber that people
Right.
live in. And so for the folks watching right now in this live that ask all the time, what can I do? When I go into a big room, and I've been doing town halls in Republican held districts. As a
Yeah.
Democratic progressive member of Congress from Central Texas, I've been in Colorado and been all across Texas. And when I go and ask in these swing districts, who here knows somebody or cares deeply for somebody that voted for Donald Trump, every hand goes up.
Mm,
And every single one of them, I ask them, hey, but that person that you're thinking of, are they a billionaire? None of them are thinking of a billionaire.
no.
None of those folks are actually getting what they wanted. They said, oh, I wanted lower costs. They said that they wanted things run better, but things
Right.
are being run way worse, and the billionaires are robbing us. So we can need to unite everybody else against those billionaire interests. You can go talk to that person, have them make a phone call. And it's not that we have to get tons of Republican members of Congress to change their minds. We just need four of them, and we
Right.
can stop this immediately. And I do think we need to bolster up the Democratic side to say, if they do this awful thing and we get back in control, then we need to not just fix what they broke, but create something much better. Not just defend our healthcare system and Social Security, but expand it. Pull every senior in this country out of poverty by expanding Social Security.
Mm,
Expand our Medicare and Medicaid systems. I'm in favor of a Medicare for all system so that everybody has healthcare and you don't have to check your bank account on the way to the doctor.
yeah.
But whatever it is we can get agreement on, we should be promising people that we can actually make life better for them.
Yeah.
Defend against the bad stuff, but there has to be something better after this.
Yeah, this is so great to hear because I just heard somebody saying, so where is Democrats Project 2028? Where is there? And when I hear you say things like this, it makes me think, well, that Democrats are thinking along these lines, and I think we really need to. That the status quo was not working, and so it is time to, if everything's going to get broken anyway, we get to rebuild in a
And
new
let's
and
rebuild
different
it
way.
better.
Yeah.
And there are people that start saying, okay, Greg, give us the plan. But you know what? I actually think that if we're really in a grassroots democracy, if the best way to fight against growing autocracy is firing up our grassroots democracy, it's actually the people who should lead and the politicians who should follow. It should be people right now in this moment coming up with what's that next idea? How I see people in the comments saying like that they feel disenchanted with the Democratic Party. A lot of people have been voting Democratic for a long time. Push our leaders, lead our leaders, and that's how we will at some point get better. When we
Yeah.
had both parties being co-opted by the millionaire and billionaire class in the 1920s, the robber barons who were like the Elon Musks of their day, they took over the government. They enriched themselves, corrupting the government. They caused the Great Depression.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the people built a labor movement, built a new feminist movement, and we elected FDR, created Social Security, the New Deal, defeated fascism around the world. Like, we're called to that kind of a moment. And so I do think that, of course, Democratic leaders need to come up with what we campaign on for the next election that is better than what we're dealing with now. But I also think the real leaders of the Democratic Party right now need to be those people making the phone calls, marching, writing letters, not giving up, holding us accountable, asking even their own Democratic leaders hard questions. That's how we get better.
That should wrap a bow on it right there. That is, it's so true. In fact, I will just say, and this is just coincidence, everybody, if you have read my newsletter today, I basically said a similar thing. I was quoting Raphael Warnock, who we heard speak at Trending Up last week, and he said, if we keep looking to the Democratic leadership to fix this situation, that's not how social movements work. It is always a people powered movement. It is always the people insisting on change and then the leaders listening to them. And I will also just say it's really refreshing to hear someone who has a working knowledge of history, because I think it's important to sort of understand what has happened before in this country, because we have dealt with robber barons
We've
before.
dealt with awful stuff before. I mean, right? There are members of Congress here who were like involved in being in Washington D.C. when the segregationists had a chokehold on this place. I mean, they were saying that people, like tons of people, weren't people. I mean,
Yes.
that's real. That's very recent, right? John Lewis he used to have an office here, like right up the hallway in this building,
Yeah.
and so like we have beat these guys before, but I think that when we have this fight, we have to talk about both how awful the current administration is, but
Yeah.
like we were saying, is that we can make things better. Because
Yeah.
LBJ, a president from Texas, who didn't always have the best civil rights record when he was in Congress,
No.
got pushed by folks just like you, the folks watching at home, to pass the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, create Medicare, Medicaid, and Head Start, basically in the course of one presidential term.
Yeah.
And we have to have those sorts of bold ideas so that if we beat the robber barons, we don't just have folks learn, okay, well, when I vote, not maybe some things don't get so bad, but what we want is for folks to feel like things actually really get better. And I see folks in
Absolutely.
the comments saying things are really awful right now, and I totally agree. But what part of what I think we hear from so many people in a place like Texas, where voter turnout rates are the lowest of the low in the country, is there are a lot of folks that say, well, no matter who I vote for, it just doesn't make enough of a difference.
Right.
And what we
Right.
want is to be able to inspire people with real hope.
Yeah. I'm so with you on that. There is a cynicism and a sense that politics is so broken in this country that there's no point. And yeah, that is what we need to address. Also, I'm obsessed with Robert Caro's Lyndon Johnson book. So really nice to hear you talk about Lyndon Johnson, deeply imperfect president, but yeah, the Great Society, wild stuff. And I think that whoever the next Democratic president, the candidate needs to have ideas like that. I think you agree with me on that. We need a great society, or we need a whatever it's
We
going to
need
be
somebody
called.
with those sorts of bold ideas, and then also somebody like there's all of the stories about LBJ, all in those books that are very worth reading. But I think it's really important to know that like he created Medicare, and they were enrolling people in the program the very next year, right?
Yeah.
Nobody could say that he didn't make a difference. And so that's how in parts of rural Texas, where that are overwhelmingly voting for Trump today,
Yeah.
they went for Democrats for generations.
Yeah.
They might have
Yeah.
had disagreements on critical civil rights issues.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be blind to that. But people said, look, the folks that delivered me Social Security, the folks that delivered me health care with Medicare and Medicaid, the people that delivered my little kids Head Start, I'm going to keep voting for them. And we need to give people that kind of thing to say, look, Elon Musk and Donald Trump might have the most corrupt administration in known history.
Yeah.
And it's not just enough to vote against that
Right.
and then to say, and then when we voted against that, actually my life got better.
Yeah.
That's how we defeat the cynicism you were just talking about
Right.
that creates the opportunity for a Trump and a Musk in the first place.
Yeah.
We can, God willing and our work willing, Trump can't be on the ballot again. But we can't be in a situation where we have 8 years of JD Vance after 4 years of this.
My God.
Everybody has that reaction when I say that, but I think we need to be serious about it because
Yeah.
look, here's a fear I have. We're working really hard and should take back the House in the midterms.
Yeah.
But if we go, okay, we took back the House, the pendulum swings back, there's nothing we got to do from here, then what
Mm.
happens if JD Vance comes in and wins the presidential? We can't have
Mm.
that happen. And I
No.
think the way we stop that from happening is we connect with those working voters that are cynical about politics and we say, look, we're going to turn a new leaf. We're going to become the anti-corruption, anti-billionaire party that puts
Yeah.
working people first, and we're going to be different. And I think that's what it'll take to defeat a JD Vance.
Right. It's a rebrand, basically. Although, essentially, I think Democrats mostly have always been anti-corruption and anti-billionaire, but that has not been the received message for many reasons.
Yeah, there's a bunch
Um,
of reasons. Some of them are some key parts of our message, like we just talked about.
right.
And then some of it is some substance where we get it together. The Republicans are getting together, kicking people off their health care, even
Right.
though their constituents and many of the members don't want to do it.
Right.
Trump is going basically sticking their head in the toilet until they vote
Right.
to kick people off their health care.
Right.
We couldn't do that to get the minimum wage raise. We had
Right.
Kristen Sinema voting against it. We
Yes,
couldn't
we
do
did.
that to ban congressional stock trading. We couldn't do that to expand Social Security, which our constituents overwhelmingly support. And
Right.
so we've got to get it together that if we get power again, we go and do the thing we told folks we were going to do. And if that means we got to be tough with our own people over here, then we got to get tough.
Absolutely. This is so good to hear. I mean, Kirsten Cinema, unbelievably one vote killing that, and so many other programs that we came so close to passing in Biden's term. I think people are unaware how close we were to paid family leave and all of the other things. And yeah, I think you're right. So, how do we do that? How do we get that kind of unanimity amongst Democrats when we sort of, it's like herding cats? Well, how do you do that?
Look, I'm chair of the Progressive Caucus, and
Mm,
that means it's about half of the Democrats in the House. And we want to get organized and get
mm,
tough and say, here are our top priorities that we're saying if we take back the House, we are going for these things. And
mhm.
we want to hear from you all. Everybody watching at home, this is the time to say, here's what I think when I go talk to my neighbor who says I don't want to like to vote, or when I go talk to that family member at Thanksgiving who voted for Trump. Here's what I think would make a difference for them. Come and tell us about that
Mm.
because now is the time for us to put that platform together, hold tight, and then when we have the House or we take back the House and Senate and the White House, we can put some of these things in play. Then when somebody is holding strong for paid family leave, holding strong for a federal child care program so that
Mm.
nobody ever has to pay more than 7% of their money to child care, holding strong to raise people's wages, you go, yeah, we're going to back you up. It's
Yeah.
all right for you to say, I'm not going to fold on this until we do the right thing.
Right.
And you know what? I think if a good handful of members of Congress hold tight on that, we can hopefully avoid the kinds of situations that we were in where we had some members of our own party, a couple of senators who have left now, voting against the priorities, not just of the vast majority of Democrats, but of the vast majority of our voters.
Yeah. Yeah. Of Americans. I agree. So let's talk quickly about corruption because one of your staffers who I've been in communication with sent me this morning a ProPublica article about Pam Bondi, and I think this is not getting enough attention. That she sold stocks, somewhere between $1 and $5 million worth of stocks, right before Donald Trump announced his Liberation Day and sent the stock market plummeting. So she basically avoided losing a ton of money. And this is one of many, many. We've got the Qatari jet. We have the crypto stuff. All of these things. There's this massive stench of corruption coming from this administration. How do we get that information out to Americans who are simply like right now, "Oh, I don't want to hear about politics. It's too depressing." How do we make them understand that this is not normal? Because even my 15-year-old is like, well, isn't that just what all isn't that just what all politicians do? How do we get Americans, again, it comes back to the cynicism, out of their cynicism about government and really show them this is not normal?
Yeah, this is nuts, right? We
Insane.
have the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, supposedly the top cop in America, selling millions of dollars in stocks right before the president makes an announcement that sends the stock market crashing, right after news that the president accepts a $400 million jet, a palace in the sky,
Mm.
from a foreign government, the biggest bribe in US history to a US president, and he's defending it daily, saying,
Yeah.
he thinks it's a good deal. At the same time, Republicans are voting to kick you off your health care, to pass a billionaire tax cut. It
Right.
can feel overwhelming. But I think the way we break through is I think we need to have proposals. We need to say, you know what? The vast majority of Americans, they think both parties are alike, right? If you ask which party's more corrupt, it's pretty split 50-50 right now.
Right.
And we need to say, look, we're going to pass laws that say no administration should be allowed to take a gift like this, to say no billionaire should be allowed to serve in the cabinet who has big contracts with the government, Democratic or Republican, that we have a Democratic platform that says we're done with this kind of bribing of our elected officials
Right.
and buying of elected officials. And I think that that would be a new core message for us because,
Mm.
look, I was a supporter of Vice President Harris in her presidential campaign, but nobody watching could say that the core message of that campaign was that billionaires are buying politicians and Trump is just bought and paid for. And instead, what we're going to do is make sure you make more money, right?
Right.
And I think that
Yeah.
Musk basically running the government and all of this corruption at every level of the Trump administration creates an opening that the Democratic Party can finally say, look, we're going to fully embrace this. And look, the news picks up stuff that's controversial, and we have to be willing to pick fights. And
Mm.
these are the sorts of fights that Democrats should be willing to pick. If
Mm.
Trump wants to defend, and it seems like he wants to defend this Qatari jet thing, he like wants to say it's some sort of art of the deal thing.
Hmm.
Let's go pick that fight.
Yeah.
Let's keep that in the news. So it's important for you to share this. This is the kind of scandals that oftentimes go unnoticed. But I
Mm.
think, like you said, it takes the grassroots
Mm.
from to pick this fight, and then Democratic leaders to say, "Hey, I'm going to support you picking this fight. Let's elevate the story.
Mm.
Let's find out all the other gifts. Let's have investigations on this. Let's subpoena people to come in. Like let's keep this thing on people's minds so that
Yeah.
Trump doesn't change the topic by picking another Greenland thing that he
Right.
wants to do or rename another Gulf somewhere."
Right. Right. And can we just get everyone in Congress on the Democratic side to please call it Hamas Force One? I think that's a genius. Just Hamas Force One. I think that the name is it's a brilliant branding thing. So because that's what it is.
I think we just have to be willing to engage in the fight, in the
Yeah.
controversy. So
Yeah.
often, like we are Mr. and Miss Responsible over here, or Girl Scouts
Yeah.
and Boy Scouts, and that doesn't get the level of attention from people that aren't always paying attention to the news. I mean, just think about it for a second: a $400 million gift to the president.
It's completely unprecedented. It's unbelievable. What is the actual limit? $450, I believe. You're not
Yeah,
allowed
yeah,
to accept
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Right?
Exactly. God knows.
Yeah, it's not 400 million. Okay, I have you for 3 more minutes. So here's my final question. So I write a newsletter where I give people call scripts and I tell people to call their representatives, and I get a lot of people all the time. Why are we doing this? Does this really work? Does it really make a difference to call my Democrat who's already doing the right thing? Or does it really make a difference to call my Republican representative who doesn't care what I think? So I like to ask members of Congress to talk about this because maybe people will believe it coming from you if they don't believe it coming from me. So does this make a difference?
If you call, it matters. When you write, it matters. When you march, it matters. When you host these town halls, it matters, and it makes a difference. Look, we track how many emails we get on a topic, but we track even more closely if somebody makes a phone call or if somebody writes a letter or if somebody is willing to come and host a town hall. I went, hundreds and hundreds of miles from my district over to north of Denver to sort of the Thornton, Colorado area, Greeley, Colorado area, and hosted a town hall with several hundred people because the congressman from the area, Gabe Evans, was not hosting in-person town halls because he's scared of explaining to people why he wants to pass a billionaire tax cut at your expense.
Right.
And no matter how much folks said, well, does this really matter? Next thing you know, he's got Fox News stories running about, how these are paid protesters, or he's got statements coming out from the RNC attacking me. He wouldn't be out there doing that if this didn't make a difference. And
Right.
so just know that it all adds up. It all makes a difference. That's how we saved the Affordable Care Act last time. And you making those phone calls, you don't know if you make the one phone call that moves the one vote that 1% further to get us there. And when I say four Republican members of Congress, it could require even fewer than that. You know why? There are some members of Congress that are so right wing that they think kicking 14 million people off of their health care isn't enough.
Right.
They might vote against it because they want 20 million people kicked off.
Yeah.
That could reduce the margin to one or two members. So your phone call might be the 100th phone call, and they wanted to go from 99 to 100.
Yeah.
And you could literally save people's lives. I mean, Medicaid pays for most births, most nursing homes. Uh, this makes a real difference. So make those phone calls, keep organizing, hold us accountable, and then support us when we're out there picking the fights.
Well said. Representative Casar, thank you so very much for your time and for your boundless energy and your wisdom and knowledge of history, and for chairing the Progressive Caucus. I'm a progressive. I love you. I love what you all are doing, and keep it up. Project 2028, here we come. Midterms, here we come. Killing the Medicaid death bill, here we come.
Here we come. Thanks a bunch, Jessica.
Thanks so much for being here. Bye. Bye, everybody.